Strangely, this past weekend we had in both the hurling and the football the All-Ireland Intermediate champions against the All-Ireland Senior Club champions. So in football that was Cara Finnegan against Tullaroan, and in hurling Friday night on TG Cahir, Ballyhale drew with Tullaroan. So I don't know if you caught this game, but one thing that came on the back of the weekend was people tweeting about how physical the Kilkenny Championship was, and then basically slating the Cork Championship because as being a bit of a non-contact sport when Glen Rovers played the Bars on Saturday night. Even the red card to Robert Downey, which I know you've seen the incident, he gave a bit of a butt of the hurley to one of the Bars players, but for me, like, it was, I mean, lie of the land, it's never a red card. Kind of tapped him with the butt of the hurl a little bit, but you know, lads are jostling into each other. The butt of the hurley is going to be somewhere. I mean, obviously you shouldn't be giving it to a lad properly, but like, yellow card at absolute most. But that whole thing, like, I got a tweet from Chris Horgan saying the Cork and Kilkenny hurling championships are light years apart. They do realise they can be physical with each other down in Cork, right? Do you kind of go along with that?
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting. I always kind of thought, even with the way the Cork inter-county team play at times, the biggest criticism you'd have of them is that it looks at times that they don't get stuck in enough. And their club championship, at times, like, that looked like an exhibition game the other night. It didn't look like lads were, right in on top of each other. There were, lads pulling jerseys, been annoying kind of, like you have to be at inter-county level. You have to be in each other's faces. And maybe at times, maybe a lot of the time, what's going on in club hurling is replicated with what's going on in the inter-county team. They're all lovely ball players. They've all got all the skills. But what's the biggest complaint? Like last year, I remember looking at Cork and Tip in the first round of Munster, and Cork never laid a glove on Tip. And then I was down in the Gaelic grounds when they played Limerick, and it was proper in your face, real manly stuff. They were getting in their faces. And when they do that, when Cork do that at county level, they're very, very hard beaten because they have all the skills and all the silky forwards and that to go with it. But a lot of time it's who can score most in some sort of a 325 to 323 championship game. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's what was replicated at club at the weekend.
Now, I'm just wondering how it manifested itself. So to me, in the Kilkenny Championship, there were teams hunting in packs, whereas the tackling in Cork, it seemed to be like it'd be just in isolation. Like if we take, for example, Simon Kennefick, the way he turned his man in the first half, ran through and was able to do the one-handed strike into the net. Like, there was no support around him, and I just thought like even the way Patrick Horgan got through, he flicked it through a guy's legs. The Red Sea part, he went through and blasted one into the top corner from 25 yards. But the point being that there's no hunting in packs, or it doesn't seem to happen to the same level. Lads aren't going to get killed in there the way they would in the Kilkenny Championship. So that's how it manifested itself to me.
Even in the Kilkenny Championship, I don't think a lad would have the time to be taking a shot from outside the 21 like Horgan did.
No.
There'd be two or three bodies in his way, and be it Hugh Lawler with O'Loughlin's, or if it was Paul Murphy with Danesford or whoever, they'd be standing there. They'd make you have to go through them to get to the goal. Whereas the other, it was just strange. It was very, it was kind of like a challenge game almost in a way. It was played on those terms. Sure, what's the biggest thing you always say? You play 4 or 5 challenge games and then you go and play a championship game and say, there's nothing like playing championship. It's that different type of intensity. Whereas that looked more like a challenge game intensity, and it looked more like the rules of engagement were like in a challenge game where, okay, no one really wants to get broke up or anything like that. But that kind of carried over into championship, where it's just wouldn't happen in Kilkenny. I think it was in the Ballyhale game against, was it Aaron's Own? I'm not too sure. No, Aaron's Own and Mulnavat. There's a picture of Mike Malone. I think it was Mike Malone playing centre back for Mulnavat, with a lot of blood going down his face and his jersey is destroyed or whatever, and he's still on the field or whatever. But I'm not being smart or having a cup, but it's just a very unlikely scene that you're likely to see in Cork. You can't bleed if you don't go into mad kind of physical contact and be putting your head and arms and different parts of your body into these positions where you're going to get hurt. And it looked like championship game versus a challenge game, really.
Which, when you go to the inter-county scene, then is this why Cork are losing so many games in latter stages of the championship, whether it's an All-Ireland final, All-Ireland semi-finals, where they've collapsed a couple of times in recent years? That might have something to do with it, whereas like the Kilkenny teams all seem to know how to set up their defence. If you run down the centre of a defence, you're going to get killed for it. There'll be a pound of flesh to pay. If we're to jump onto that Ballyhale Tullaroan game, Tullaroan actually had that one, and I think that would have been a huge shock across the county if they had to do so, because you're just coming up from intermediate. A goalkeeping mistake in the first half allowed Ballyhale to bring it back. TJ Reid put in a speculative ball. He actually missed a man that he was trying to hit a stick pass to. Goalkeeper made a mistake. I thought Shane Walsh and Mossy Keown were very, very good for Tullaroan. So was Pádraig Walsh. Patrick Mullen had some really tasty moments for Ballyhale. And you know what? I think it definitely needs to be pointed out that Ballyhale are playing with a little bit of a weaker hand now than they were earlier in the year. Henry Shefflin is gone. Now James O'Connor looks a very good manager and he has a great record. But Michael Fennelly is gone from centre back. Just in a leadership thing, that's huge. Adrian Mullen is he's possibly out for the season. We'll have to see how he recovers from his cruciate. And they had an injury early in the game to Darren Mullen. So you're not exactly playing with the same full hand that you had earlier in the year. Colin Fennelly even had to go off also. So the fact that they came from behind and TJ snapped the ball late on for Owen Reid to finish, they did actually very well, considering it felt like everything was going against them.
Yeah, and a difficult thing to do. They've basically had to rebuild without a lot of contact time, without going back in January and having January, February, March, maybe a game or two in April, and then go all the way through to August where they're going to be playing the rest of the championship games. It's all fairly kind of full on. I suppose maybe Tullaroan will see it as a bit of a missed opportunity, but when you look at it, before Tullaroan got relegated from the senior a couple of years ago, they were really struggling. They hadn't won many games in 4 or 5 years and were winning kind of relegation finals to stay up. So for them to be as competitive as they were and to probably have beaten, the reigning All-Ireland champions in the first game would have been huge. But at least they got something. They got something out of the game. They didn't get the 2 points that they wanted, but at least they got something out of it. Very, very competitive, very enjoyable game from the bits I saw as well. Particularly. For even for this time of the year when you're thinking lads are going to be making mistakes or might be a bit ring rusty or whatever, but very, very enjoyable game. Just a bit of cuteness at the end, just to pull a result when things were going against Ballyhale. Just that bit of kind of cuteness and fairness at the end. But a great game to start it off. And just what you're saying as well, what are the odds of the All-Ireland senior and intermediate champions being playing in the opening round in 2 different counties, in 2 different provinces on the same weekend? I think it's bizarre. I've never even really heard of it happening, even within a county, be it Kerry, All-Ireland Intermediate and Junior Football, or All-Ireland Senior and Intermediate. I've never even heard of it happen, let alone happen in 2 counties and 2 provinces on the same weekend. It's nuts.
Yeah, and absolutely. And then even for the manager of Ballyhale, that his previous game was against Tullaroan for Father O'Neill's, who were in the All-Ireland Intermediate final, that he would then end up managing against Tullaroan again. That is kind of nuts. What about young Tommy Walsh, who of course did very well in that All-Ireland Intermediate final against Declan Dalton. Now Dalton did get some scores and one beautiful goal from play that I remember clearly. But he had a great performance against Colin Fennelly. And Colin Fennelly went off injured, so there's always a chance that he wasn't 100% right. But Tommy Walsh came out and won an awful lot of ball. Fennelly still won frees, got a couple of points, but a fantastic performance. He looks like a serious answer in the full back line for Kilkenny somewhere, whether it's full or corner.
Yeah, he was probably fast-tracked in the last year or two to the Kilkenny team, maybe a bit sooner than would have been ideal, or a bit sooner than Cody would have maybe with someone in the past before. But he's definitely, and even Mossy Keown, who obviously played that league final in 2018, I think, when they won the league, he hasn't really seen much game time since. But it's funny when you're parachuted in and maybe you're a bit young and a bit raw, you learn your few lessons. Generally, if they're made of good stuff, they'll come back a couple of years later and be better for the experience and a bit more polished for it. So he looks like the sort of lad that could definitely be a long-term solution, be it, as you say, a corner or a fullback. And all of a sudden, they're looking at Hugh Lawler, who had a great year last year, particularly thrown in to the Wolves kind of in many ways against the best forward on the opposition team in nearly every game they played. He had a good year, and then you're looking at maybe Tommy Walsh coming in, you're looking at maybe Pádraig Walsh bedding in at centre back, and all of a sudden things look maybe a lot more settled than they did, a year or 18 months ago.
A couple of other results in Kilkenny. James Stevens 19 points, Danesford 114, Erin's Own 20, Mulnavat 117, a draw, and Dixborough 215, the Roar Inistioge 12 points. So we'll just move on to Cork then, and we kind of talked briefly about Glen Rovers against the Bars and that red card, but you were surprised at Cathal McAllister showing him the line.
My favourite referee of them all. It's funny, Cathal McAllister, usually at inter-county level, I never forget, we played Limerick in the Gaelic grounds in a qualifier in 08, and I was marking Andrew O'Shaughnessy, and he literally let me and everybody else away with murder. He let everything go, and he has that tendency even in a big game. He just lets it flow, and it totally favours the back. It also totally favours the spectacle of the game because things are flowing a lot more. But usually now, like I wouldn't say in his head that he would deem that a red card, but maybe he felt the need to brandish one or whatever, or maybe they've been looked at kind of closely at the first round. But he's usually a good man to let things go, in fairness to him.
Yeah, and what was so shocking was the fact that the Bars weren't all that far behind when it happened, and they brought the game fairly close. They had it back to 4 points, and then all of a sudden just collapsed for the rest of the game, 3-20 to 15 points. It feels like the Bars are a mile off it, and it's not like Glen Rovers have been challenging regularly for Munster and All-Ireland titles. Fine, they've obviously been in Munster a few times and went in, have gone in, like let's say for example last year when Eamon McKilly couldn't go through and represent Cork. But like, you wonder how far down the pecking order are the Bars when their more skillful scores are coming from wing-back Damien Cahalane, and there's very few of their players actually stepping up in the game, and you're thinking, wow, he's one for the future.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very tough for them. It's not going to get any easier because I think there's 12 of them playing dual at the moment, so they're playing every week. 12, I think it's 12 starters. I know the fullback is one of many. He plays fullback in both codes. So like, it's going to get harder as the weeks go on. It's definitely not going to get easier, and you're probably going to find that they will contest in one and possibly exit early in the other. That's just kind of a natural thing, and I think the footballers won the first weekend, so they're going to find it very, very hard. When you have that many lads, I see it with Belmont and Forban, even in Offaly, it's going to be it's going to be particularly harder than most years as well, to keep that kind of dual mandate when you have a dozen lads basically between the two that are going to feature hurling and football, and that's not simple at all. Damien Cahalane obviously been one of them as well, and it will catch up on you over time.
What about Patrick Horgan at 11? So we normally see him on the inside line because he is so devastating. But it reminded me the way he was able to get himself into the game, pop off a few points, basically pull out the defence so that Simon Kennefick could create havoc on the inside. Patrick Horgan at 11 for Cork. Could he do what Joe Canning has done since he moved out to centre forward with Galway?
Well, it's like this. They generally, unless Seamus Hardy is playing centre forward, they generally don't put big boomers down on top of the half forward line. So if they're just playing through the lines like they've been trying to do over the last couple of years, remember Conor Lahan, when he played centre forward even a couple of years ago, it was all drifted out to the wing. It was all balls into space, which Anthony Nash or Patrick Collins or whoever's in goals will be well capable of doing. So I wouldn't see any reason why not. Obviously you're taking a goal threat away from the goal, but in a way they have a lot of other threats. And it would just mean maybe that when things are struggling, Horgan's out, 65, 80 yards out the pitch and can get a couple of scores maybe off kind of loose balls out around there. But it's an interesting one. It'd be interesting if he went so well last year full forward that they would consider taking him, moving him away from a position that he's thriving in. Whereas when Joe was moved from full forward, it's kind of, teams are kind of maybe dropping a player back in front of him and making it much more difficult for him, and maybe he wasn't the same kind of goal threat, or maybe had become a bit one-dimensional. So I don't know whether he'd be putting him out centre forward at this stage of his career, but it's definitely an option during games, maybe I'd say more than a permanent position.
Yeah, I definitely will looking to see could I do it, because Shane Kingston looks like he could be on fire in full forward, and if Horgan goes out to centre forward, he needs to be watched a little bit more tightly, which could possibly open up more space inside, whether it's actually even Alan Cadigan and Shane Kingston in there, or another as well. So I think it's an option worth looking at. What about Simon Kennefick, grandson of Christy Ring, got himself a couple of goals, looked really, really good. He seems to have kicked on this year.
How many times do you reckon people have said that you wouldn't lace your grandfather's boots?
I'd say
but the thing is, I'm sure many people have said it, and you just say, who could lace his boots? Nobody could. Not me anyway. Do you know what I mean? He looked very good. Thought he should have been dragged down for that first goal, and cynical or
like
or
man
not.
gets through, ball gets through, but man and ball don't both get through.
The defender gave a pull at his jersey, but kind of let go then or whatever. He looks like a very good player, very quick. I thought the ring kind of image in the jersey was class, because I thought it was quite subtle as well. You had to look relatively closely to see it. I thought that was really cool. I think it was 100 years from the day he was born, I think, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, 100 years. I think it'll be October. When is some date in October is 100 years since he was born. But yeah, definitely the centenary anniversary of his birth. So elsewhere in the Cork Championship, Newtown Shandon 21, Bishopstown 115, Carrigtwohill and Napirsig 17 points apiece. Douglas beat Ballyhale 17 points to 111, and Blackrock beat Erin's Own 216 to 212. Also Sarsfields beat Middleton 217 to 117. Liam Healy with 1-7, 10 points for Conor Lahan and 1-1 for Luke O'Farrell. So Carlow Championship, Mount Leinster Rangers, they beat Nave Owen 116 to 2-5, expected enough. Greystones beat Avondale 311 to 210 in Wicklow. Moving on to the Limerick Championship then. Napirsig had a win over Hand, 223 to 9 points. Adrian Breen and Will Henn with the goals. So a fair sign that they've recovered from how they faded out against Kilmallock. Obviously they'll be looking to hit the ground running, and that'll surely give them a bit of confidence putting up that sort of scoreline.
As I said to you, like, if you're going to get beaten in the first round game against a team that's very, very competitive and have a chance to regroup, and they were always going to win against the Hand, it'd be far too strong for them. So at least they've got the wheels back on track then. And just a couple of the other matches there, obviously South Liberties beat Maru Bohor, Blackrock and Gary Spillane a draw. Just moving on to the Offaly Championship there as well, which I'd have a fair interest in myself, obviously. As I said about Belmont and Forban in the football, it's Belmont and hurling, Forban and football. They're obviously reigning football champions, but they'd have a fair crossover, lads, as well. They would have been expected to run Rhinus close, if not defeat them in the first round. Rhinus, the reigning champions, obviously. They went down by a goal. Rhinus 20 points, Belmont 114. Belmont will still be in the shake-up when things go on a bit further. The only worry would just be with that the amount of players that are going to be involved there. Coolaria and Sir Kieran, Coolaria 116, Sir Kieran 18 points. David Tour, only a young fella, he was on the St Brendan's Community School team this year that won the Leinster and the rest of Leinster. He got shoulder surgery then, actually missed the All-Ireland semi-final, but he got the crucial goal, and I believe was hitting a few frees as well. Two local rivals there, big win for Coolaria. Whichever way that had went, the Coolaria are in with a realistic shout now, whereas if they'd lost that game, they would have been maybe under pressure. Now maybe Clarine are the ones under pressure. Kilcormac 17 points, Borough 14. That was on Friday night. We were on top for a good bit of it, about 45 minutes, and just kind of faded out. Kilcormac had been playing a kind of a short game, and then they reverted maybe more to type. Ger Healy went in full forward, caused a load of trouble. A couple of high balls went in there. Kieran Slevin came on as well, another experienced player, had a couple of goal chances, and they pulled away and won by 3. Unfortunately, I'm not going to lie.
Can I ask you a question though? Because I did see that Kieran Slevin was named on the bench, and he was the free taker and one of the key men when Kilcormac got to the All Ireland in 2013, if I remember correctly. Is it just that he's a little bit more advanced in age now, or like I presume he still has great hands?
Oh yeah, no, he still have great hands in that. Yeah, they're not, with regards to free taking duties, they wouldn't be short, because they have Killian Kiley and they have his brother Carl as well, first and second in the long puck fodder last year, so they wouldn't be short on free takers there as well. Probably just advancing years as well, but no more than that. It's with older players, maybe the chance a few younger lads starting off, and maybe they're the ones that will be probably starting the next day now, the more experienced players as things go on. There was a belter of a game on Friday night as well. Ballinamere 221, Shinrone 318. I believe Shinrone got a last minute goal to draw there. A big game for both of them as well, because if either had lost, they'd kind of be chasing their tail. Ballinamere won a relegation final to stay up last year, but definitely look like they've kicked on a bit this year. So the groups there, so it's Rhinus, Belmont, Ballinamere and Shinrone, and it's Coolaria, Sir Kieran, Kilcormac and Borough. Really, it's a proper advocate of an 8-team championship where you cannot take any team for granted, and literally any team can be anyone in a given day. That's going to be very, very competitive. There's going to be 4 strong teams gone after the group stages. Actually,
when we were talking about Kilkenny, we should have mentioned the fact that Peter Barry played for the Junior B James Stevens team over the weekend. I'd say that was a game not to be missed.
No, definitely, yeah. Like it's great, and we'll come on to, I'm sure, a couple of other legends that are hanging around in other counties and in other codes as well. But great to see lads like that giving back. And imagine when you were older like that, and I don't know if he played in recent years, and I think he's a selector with the Kilkenny 20s this year. Well, I'd say there was a fair itch, just like sitting around for the last good while, or going for walks, or bringing the dog for a walk, or whatever, and you'd just be mad to think, jeez, I'd love to go and poke a few balls. And I'd say there's lads that were thinking about retirement that are just like, sure, like it's only 6 weeks or it's only 2 months, and we'll give it a good go. Like, so it was funny then to see as well, talking about the village, Brian Cody had the mask on in Nolan Park, obviously. I love the way people are like, leading by example or whatever. It was funny last week because somebody put up something like that for Liam Sheedy. He was at the Tullaroan game in Thurles last year, I think it was, or last week, and there was one picture with the mask on and one picture with the mask off somewhere else. But I'd say you're fairly safe when there's no one within about 40 yards of you not to be wearing a mask outside. But yeah, interesting, just different to see Cody. It's kind of like there's a Dart Cody Twitter account, and that probably, I'd say this picture would probably be the profile picture for that for a good while after the weekend.
Waterford Championship then, Rowan Moore and Clonea 4-16-9 for Rowan Moore. Passage beat Tallow 118-17 points, and Lismore had a nice win over 4 Mile Water 222-20 points. The big thing, of course, was Maurice Shanahan scoring 217, so that included 14 frees, 1 3 from play and a goal from a penalty. His brother Dan came on for as little as a 28 senior or adult club season for Lismore, which is incredible stuff. But Maurice Shanahan 217, like, I mean, that has to prick Liam Cahill's ears and make him think, right, maybe leaving him off the Waterford panel, was that the best decision? What do you think?
You imagine it would definitely raises kind of, he'd definitely be intrigued anyway by it, because as we said, the more than the club season, the county season is going to be different. They're not going to have this big huge body of work done. I think, I heard Michael Verney saying it in Offaly, like they have an Offaly panel at the moment, but it's unbelievably open-ended if a load of lads put their hands up in club action. If lads put their hands up in club action, they're playing really, really well, and you can just carry that into the county season, which is a short enough season this year. There's no reason why they couldn't come in. So I definitely would think there's a possibility of that happening. Even I'd love to see it from the fact that I like to see lads going out on their own terms and, at least togging out or getting the chance to tog out. He's obviously an all-star back in 2015. It's only 5 years on. He's obviously clearly shown a load of form. I think he said after that he's been out cycling loads and stuff like that. And Tomas McCarthy asked him, was it his best game in club colours? And he just said it's up there. And typical Maurice just said it's not about me. I couldn't care less if we didn't score in this more one. I'd be a happy man going home tonight. I have the easy job to put them over the bar. Today was a knockout game for this more. Now next week they play Dungarvan, and Dungarvan will die with their boots next weekend, because if they don't win, they're out, and if they beat us by enough, we could be out. So it'd be great to see him get another chance at Waterford. I don't know. I think Liam Cahill is the sort of man that when he draws a line in the sand, he draws a line in the sand, and that there's no going back. But you never know. Could be wrong.
Yeah, and the thing I would say is that if you were building a team for the summertime, I can see why he might move in a different direction, because he's looking for speedy players. And Maurice is a lot of things, but he's probably not as nimble as the likes of Desi Hutchinson. You could probably pick another couple of players that are on that panel. But he's a ball winner, and in slightly, like, I know the pitches are all going to be good, but conditions are going to be heavier later in the year, and he seems to always put up big scores for Lismore. So you could do worse than have an eye on him. And I think Liam Cahill would be kind of mature enough to reconsider it if he felt that Maurice was going good enough. So that's definitely one to monitor.
Just on that as well, like we talked about like the Waterford full, like we came to full forwards the other day when we were talking in our debate about hurling full forwards. We didn't really have anyone for Waterford. Like Tom Devine was the last one that you would have had, a big barreling kind of a full forward. I think there's a lot to be said, particularly for winter hurling, even if it's in very good stadiums, of having a big guy like that with loads of experience, who, remember, he's not going to be chasing around an extra defender now this time. Well, you wouldn't think he would be. So we give him a chance to express himself a bit more. Plus, when you have a big man in there like that, there's ball breaks left and right, forward and back, and it gives the corner forward something to work off. Whereas if you have three forwards that are the same, size-wise, speed-wise, they kind of all offer the same thing. I would hope that there's a chance that he could be called back in. I said I'm not privy to what Liam Cahill thinks, but it'll definitely be interesting.
Abbeyside against Ballysaggart, so a 223-1-6 win for Abbeyside, comfortable enough. That means that Ballysaggart are out of the competition, having lost to De La Salle by 13 points, and now by 23 points. So, like, and we've seen this in a couple of other counties as well, like with Wexford and Clockbawn being one example. They didn't play the first week of the Wexford Championship in the 3-team group. They played the second week and the third week. They lost both games. So in the space of 7 days, their entire club season is over. And anyone out there who wonders, why do you need the CPA? And this is an exceptional year and you're going to have condensed calendars and all that. But anyone who thinks that a team season should last a week or 2 weeks or something like that, and I'll tell you from the Dublin Club Championship, as I've said before, you often have the group stages in April. A team plays 2 of their games, they lose them both, they're out. That third game in September is meaningless. So a team season is effectively over in 2 weeks. This is why you have the CPA, because you can't year after year have the likes of a Clockbawn or whoever it might be, or Ballysaggart, with their season over in a week or two.
How do you maintain interest? How do you maintain involvement? How do you keep numbers up, particularly in somewhere like Ballysaggart, which is pulling off very, very small numbers? Like, realistically, this year is obviously a bit different, but if lads could head away after the championship was over, they probably would, and some of them might not come back. You know, that's just the nature of it. Lads hang around usually for club championship and then will tip away after and maybe not come back or maybe come back. But very, very hard to maintain involvement and interest within a club, especially like, not just even for players, for volunteers within the club. Everything that's done, be it, the clubhouse, the pitch, all the underage teams or whatever, it's all geared towards the senior adult teams. That is what it's geared towards. And if they're all gone, there's no kind of interest to have, there's nothing to look at, there's nothing to strive towards, there's nothing to get excited about. So the only thing I will say is, one positive is Ballysaggart there's no prospect of them being relegated. Last year's intermediate winners, there was a vote taken, and I think it won by one vote that they were going to say they were going to scrap relegation, and something similar happened in Wexford with Clockbawn, and they can't be relegated as well. So that's kind of one kind of silver lining, I suppose.
Yeah, so this would be an exceptional year for that, of course. Just to run through the results in Wexford, so Clockbawn, like I've mentioned, 113, Oulart 314, Fate Harriers 114, Feathered 11 points, Naveana 213, Shelmaliers 212, and Glen Parntown 119, 116 for Rathnure. So that means the quarterfinals, which are going to start Friday 7th of August, are St Martin's against Glen Barntown, Naveana against Fern St Aidan's, Fate Harriers against Shelmaliers, which I believe is going to be on TV on Sunday, and then St Anne's against Oulart de Bala.
Yeah, just on that as well, like, it's amazing how quick we're at this stage, isn't it? Like, we talked about Clockbawn are basically out in 7 days, and if you pick up a knock, you're under awful pressure. You're basically playing essentially kind of week on week. So, as I said to you kind of before, the teams and squads that are able to keep, their 23 or 24 fit, even if they go down to 20 or 21 fit, they'll still be in good shape. But the team that picks up, a couple of injuries, hamstring injuries or whatever, that's going to keep a lad out for 3 or 4 weeks, you're kind of goose is cooked at that stage, really. So it's whoever, and club squads are obviously probably a lot smaller and probably being generous with 23 or 24. It's more like 17 or 18. But if you're down to the bare bones, you're in trouble, because invariably lads will pick up a knock. But be interesting to see how that plays out. You'll probably still have the Martins as fairly heavy favourites, you'd imagine.
Yeah, and I'm also interested to see how St Anne's get on this year, because they got to the county final last year after getting beaten by something like 30 points, 34 points maybe by St Martin's earlier on in the championship. But I think they probably didn't have Diarmuid O'Keefe and Liam O'McGovern at that stage of the championship. So interesting to see how they get on against Oulart de Bala. That should be a good old match.
Yeah, you have Mikey Fogarty mixing his jockey duties with his pastime of playing hurling as well, which is an interesting one. I remember last year he rode a winner at Galway on the Thursday before the county final. So I'd say his manager is constantly sweating. I think, what was it last year? He rode a winner in Galway on the Thursday, trained by his brother John, who was also on the St Anne's team. Yeah, interesting times always down there.
Well, with the quarterfinal, you hope they don't fall at the third last hurdle. Can I go there? Yeah, that's absolutely cat. Hey, if there's any stories we missed from the weekend, please let us know, and we'll catch up with that stuff in the next episode. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks a million, Shane.